The NBA is awesome.
Is this the dagger?
But it's also kind of broken. Load management, a horrible all-star game, a regular season that nobody watches. These are just a handful of the issues that are slowly spoiling the NBA that we know and love. So let's fix it. Using ideas from wherever we can find them, let's improve the NBA one thing at a time. In part 1 of this series, we fixed the problem of too many great players and not enough spots by adding 2 new teams to our league. But this time, we've got a much bigger problem to contend with. That being, while the NBA shines in the playoffs, the regular season is plagued with problems. The first big problem is that great players miss a ton of games. And in my opinion, there's 3 main reasons for this. The first reason that players miss games is injuries. But while some injuries are unavoidable, there seems to be more injuries in the NBA today than ever before. And there's a reason for this. Because of the AAU circuit, most players come into the NBA with their bodies pretty worn down already. Then you add to that the game is way more demanding on players' bodies than it used to be, with a faster pace, increased space and movement, and a more skilled and athletic collection of players. Combine all that with a brutal 82-game schedule filled with back-to-back games, and it's no wonder why we have more injuries than ever before. This also ties in with the second reason players miss games: load management. Load management is when healthy players intentionally sit out of games in hopes of preventing injuries and fatigue. It can also sometimes refer to sitting out games due to minor injuries in order to avoid risking a major one. Players who are older or injury prone tend to load manage the most, but in today's game, almost every star player load manages multiple games throughout the season. This gets particularly bad when teams have back-to-back games, making them much more likely to rest their stars in hopes of preventing injury. The third and final reason players miss games is the simplest. Regular season games just don't matter that much. In a sport like the NFL, with only 17 games in a season, every win matters, with playoff appearances and playoff standings often being decided by a single game. But in the NBA, we've got 82 games. One loss is just a drop in the bucket. So why should players play in all the games when doing so could risk them getting injured and missing the playoffs altogether? These 3 factors, injuries, load management, and lots of games, mean that star players sit out all the time. Or even worse, they show up to the game but play limited minutes or give minimal effort. All of this leads to our second big problem, which is that most fans just don't seem to care about the regular season. We can see this most clearly in the NBA's TV ratings, which have dropped over the past few years while other sports like the NFL have been thriving. Some people might blame this drop-off on ring culture and the NBA media, but I think the 2 biggest culprits are the issues that we've already discussed: players missing games and games not mattering. When an NBA fan turns on their TV, or God forbid goes to an arena, they have no idea who's going to play, who's going to sit out, who's healthy, who's injured, who's going to play hard, and who's not. And on top of that, even if their stars play and their team wins, it's just one game in an 82-game season. Worst of all, these 2 issues combine to create a vicious cycle. Because players miss games, fans don't care about the regular season and only care about the playoffs. And because fans only care about the playoffs, players sit out even more games. So fans care even less about the regular season, and on it goes. Add all this together, and it's no wonder why most NBA fans don't start to care about basketball until the playoffs. So how do we fix all this? Well, if you've been paying close attention, you may have noticed that one factor lies at the center of every one of these issues. So we can fix them with starting next year, our NBA regular season will be 54 games long, with a 2-week All-Star break and no back-to-backs. Immediately, this fixes so many of the problems that we mentioned before. Less games and more space between them means less injuries and less need for load management, which means players will play more games. It also means that each game matters more, which means fans will actually watch the games. The vicious cycle is finally broken and everybody wins. Now I know what you're thinking. Are you crazy? The NBA would never do this. It would reduce their profits. And you're right, this would reduce their profits. But we don't care about that. We care about making the NBA better, and this does. Anyway, now that we've reduced the number of games and eliminated back-to-backs, we need to create a new NBA schedule, which leads us to In our NBA, each team will play every team outside of their conference once, every team in their conference twice, and every team in their division 3 times, plus 4 in-season tournament games and 1 bonus game for a total of 54 games. For 30 of 32 teams, the bonus game will be a rivalry game, 1 extra game against a recent or historic rival. For the remaining 2 teams, this game will be the in-season championship game. The home and road splits will be 50-50, with each team playing 25 games at home and 25 games on the road, not counting the in-season tournament. Teams that play each other twice will get 1 game at home and 1 on the road, while teams that play once or 3 times will alternate which team gets more home games each season. The math here works because of our newly expanded NBA, with 16 teams per conference and 4 teams per division. It's simple and symmetrical, it's as fair and even as possible while still having rivalries and reducing travel time, and it makes every game a can't-miss event rather than merely an afterthought. To get a better idea of what all this will look like, let's take a look at starting next year. The NBA season starts on Christmas Day. From December 25th to December 30th, each team plays every other team in their division for a total of 3 games. Next, from December 31st to January 23rd, each team plays every other team in their conference once for a total of 12 games. Then, from January 25th to February 9th, each team plays 8 of the 16 teams outside of their conference for a total of 8 games. Next up, from February 11th to February 16th, each team plays every other team in their division again for a total of 3 games. Then, from February 18th to February 25th, each team plays 5 in-conference games, some of which are part of the in-season tournament and some of which are not. Finally, the first half of the season culminates on February 27th and 28th with the rivalry games and the NBA Cup. Immediately after this is the All-Star break, which spans 2 weeks from March 1st to March 13th, with All-Star Weekend happening right in the middle from March 7th to March 9th. Before we continue, let's pause and break down what we've done so far. First, the NBA starts on Christmas, so there's less overlap with the NFL, the first day of the season is an actual event again, and Christmas Day will once again be more about basketball than football. The new schedule is fair and predictable, but it still allows for some flexibility when needed. The small gaps between different stretches of the season ensure no back-to-back games, but also serve as a great opportunity to highlight WNBA games. And last but not least, having the All-Star break right after the in-season tournament allows teams to ramp up for the tournament without the risk of having letdown games once the tournament has concluded. Continuing on, the season resumes on March 14th. From March 14th to March 29th, each team plays 8 in-conference games before the trade deadline on March 30th. Next, from March 31st to April 15th, each team plays their 8 remaining out-of-conference games. Then, from April 17th to April 24th, each team plays their 4 remaining in-conference games. And finally, from April 25th to April 30th, each team plays their 3 remaining in-division games before the conclusion of the regular season on May 1st. This second half of the season continues the benefits of the first half while having even more simplicity and urgency. It also pushes the trade deadline back, which encourages more trades as teams have a clear idea of how good they are and whether they want to be buyers or sellers. And finally, this final stretch serves as the perfect ramp-up for the play-in, the playoffs, and the NBA Finals. So there we have it. We've shortened the season to 54 games and eliminated back-to-backs, we've simplified the schedule to make it fair and more straightforward, and we've adjusted the calendar to make it clearer, more logical, and more exciting. Stars actually play, fans actually watch, and everyone is pumped out of their mind for the new NBA season to begin.